Hello everyone. In this lesson we're going to answer the question, what is a view, and also, what is the Blade template engine? Let's jump right into the action. To get started, I think it's actually easier to show you what a Blade template is instead of trying to just explain it with words. So right now I want you to do this with me, and then in about a minute or two we can actually explain what Blade is. But here's what I want you to do. In our main project folder, I want you to find the resources folder, look inside it, and then I want you to go inside the views folder. And you should see that there's just one existing file in there called welcome.blade.php. That's okay, we can leave that for now, but let's create a new file, a brand new file that will live in this views folder. So I'm just going to right click on the views folder and choose new file. Now the name doesn't matter, we can name it anything. So let's call it maybe just homepage. But now here's what does matter. The file extension needs to end in .blade.php. Cool. Now inside this brand new file, we are free to write HTML. And we do not need to wrap everything inside quotes for a string of text, nor do we need to say echo, nor do we even need to enter PHP mode. We can have a completely empty file and then, just start typing in HTML. Now, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can get a bit of boilerplate for an HTML skeleton by just typing DOC and then hit tab on your keyboard. Cool, so that gives you an HTML skeleton. Maybe inside the body tag, let's have a heading level 1. So just H1, hit tab and say, hello, this is a Blade template. You can say anything you want, but then go ahead and save the file. Okay, and now the question becomes, how would we actually use this for our home page? Right? If you don't already have your preview server running, remember you can just fire it up in the command line. Let me press Control-C to stop it. You can start it up again with php artisan serve. Cool. So how would we actually use that new template file that we just created for our home page? Check this out. All we need to do is go into our controller. So in the app folder, http, controllers, and remember we had this file called examplecontroller.php. If you jump into that file, remember for our homepage function, we were returning this string of text. Well, let's do this instead. You can entirely remove that line, and in its place, we can just say return, and then Laravel has a globally available helper function called view. So view, parentheses to call it, be sure to end that line with a semicolon. Okay, and now in these parentheses, when we call view, for the first argument, we just tell it the name of the template. So in other words, the file that we created in our views folder, we named it homepage.blade.php. You don't need the file extension, so it would just be homepage, right? You don't need to include .blade.php. So just the first part of the file name, that's all we need. You can save that. And now as soon as we refresh the homepage, there we see the Blade template. Cool, let's go ahead and add that link back in that points to the About page. So you would just go into your homepage Blade template, and below that we could have a link, and the href value would be /about. So go to the About page. You can save, refresh, awesome. Now, I promised we would explain what Blade is. So Blade is the official templating engine of Laravel. So it's included in Laravel right out of the box. You and I don't need to install anything extra. We just get immediate and easy access to the Blade templating language. So at the moment, we're not doing anything fancy. This is literally just plain HTML, right? This might as well just be an HTML file. So let me show you some of the special features that Blade offers. For example, imagine if we wanted to add, a paragraph p tag in HTML, and we wanted to say, a great number is, and then imagine if we wanted to dynamically add 2 + 2 on the server side. Now, you could just say 4, but if you wanted to actually prove that you're doing something dynamic, in a Blade template file, you can just have double curly brackets like this. So 2 opening curly brackets and then 2 closing curly brackets. Now, inside there, we can do something dynamic. So we could say 2 + 2. If we save that and refresh, there you see it. It actually performed that operation, that dynamic value. We could also say, imagine if we wanted a paragraph that said, the current year is blank. And then instead of hard coding this to the current year, if you wanted to always dynamically output, programmatically the current year, it would just be call the PHP function called date and just give it an argument of single quotes, uppercase Y for year. You can save that, refresh, there you have it. So the idea here is we are free to write just traditional plain HTML, but when you want to do something dynamic, right, when you want to use a little bit of PHP for dynamic flexibility, you just open up double curly brackets like this. Now in just a minute, I want to show you how we can pass dynamic data from our controller into the template when we call this, return view and then the name of our template. But before we even get to that, let's jump back into our Blade template. I first want to show you how to get Visual Studio Code to play nicely with the Blade templating language. So for example, yes, you and I know that the double curly brackets like this allows us to do something dynamic, but VS Code has no idea. VS Code doesn't know that this Blade syntax even exists. So it's not going to color code or highlight the syntax, in a unique color so that you and I can just immediately look at this and make sense of it. So we want VS Code to speak the Blade language. Also, it would be nice if VS Code could auto-complete or auto-suggest different Blade features as we're typing them out. So right now, in order to get VS Code to play along with Blade, we're just going to install an excellent free extension in VS Code. So over on the left-hand side of the program, I want you to click this icon right about here. If you hover over it, it will say extensions. So let's click on that. And then in this search box that appears, I want you to search for Laravel Blade Snippets. In the results that appear, I'm interested in this one, Laravel Blade Snippets. If you click on it, as of today, the author of the package is Winnie Lin. I've had really good luck with this extension. I recommend it, so I'm going to click this install button right here. Cool. So you can go ahead and close this screen and then click this icon to go back into the File Explorer instead of the Extensions menu. Okay, and now you can see down here, if we're viewing our Blade file, VS Code is aware that this is a Blade file, and notice we're getting color code highlighting for Blade syntax. Cool. So now that we've taken care of that, let's get back to the task at hand, and that is understanding what a view is. Because a view is a concept that is not unique to Laravel. And there are tons and tons of different view engines out there. So some popular ones are Pug, Mustache, EJS, Handlebars, Twig, and yes, you may have guessed it, Blade. So Blade is Laravel's own official template engine. Now, the main concept here before we move forward is just this idea of separation of concerns. So the idea is that a controller, if we jump back into our controller, the controller is like a project manager or like the dispatcher for a fire department. So a request comes in and then the controller makes sort of the top level big picture decisions, but it delegates specialty responsibilities to other team members to get the job done. So for example, our homepage method, we might perform all sorts of top level tasks like loading data from a database, so on and so forth, making different decisions, but then we're ultimately delegating the responsibility of the view or the template the visitor sees to the view engine, right? So that is not the responsibility of the controller, that's the responsibility of the view. Now, on that same exact note, it's also the opposite is true, right? The view is not responsible for making top-level decisions. The view is not responsible for querying data. The view is supposed to be very simple. We don't want to do anything very complex in the view. Now, yes, we did perform a little bit of dynamic action here by saying 2 plus 2 or, outputting the current year. That's okay. But any sort of real complexity like querying the database for something very, very specific or checking to see if the current user is the author of a certain blog post, so on and so forth. That should not be done in the view. The view should be very simple and it just has one job, right? Outputting the HTML. So it's the separation of concerns, right? The view has one job, the controller has a totally separate job. Now this approach is wildly different from, for example, if you've ever coded your own WordPress themes from scratch and written all of the PHP, or if you've ever created a website using PHP without a framework. You're used to the opposite approach where all of your PHP and logic, all of your complexity is mixed in to the HTML that you're trying to output, right? And it's just one big messy spaghetti tangle of messy code. That approach is why PHP got a bad reputation about 15 years or so ago. But in the modern era, we don't need to have messy spaghetti code like that. In fact, Laravel encourages or forces us to have clean, organized code with separation of concerns. So speaking of those separate concerns, right now I want to practice something very important with you, and that is passing a bit of data from the controller into the view. So you can do this with me, right? Inside of our controller and our homepage method, you could even write a comment, right? And say like, imagine we loaded data from the database. So any sort of complexity, any sort of data loading should be going on in the controller, not in the view. Now, we haven't even learned about the database aspect of Laravel yet. So just for a quick example, instead of actually talking to a database, let's just create a variable, so $, and let's say, our name equals quotes, and then just put in your name, and then end the line with a semicolon. Cool. Now, when we are returning a view, check this out. In these parentheses, yes, the first argument is the name of the view file that you want to use, but then you have a comma and a second argument, and now you can give it an array, so square brackets, and now you can pass it any data you want to. So you just spell out an associative array. So first of all, you say quotes, and then let's say name, and then equals greater than, and then you assign it a value, right? So you could say quotes Brad, but we already have a variable named our name. Use your imagination that this was actually coming from a dynamic database query. But you can define as many different properties in this associative array as you want to. So you could say comma, and then have another property. So you could say, cat name equals greater than quotes meows a lot. Cool. Let's go ahead and save this. So the idea is we're passing these values into the view, and then if you go back into your Blade template file, watch this. We could have, like a heading level 3 and, double curly brackets and just say $name. If you give that a save, right, that should output Brad or whatever you put for your name. Or, below that you could have a heading level 2, Blade double curly brackets, and then say what do we name it? Cat name. So cool, meows a lot. So the idea is that the view is not asking the database for anything. The view is not doing anything of real complexity. The view just receives the data that you give it, and its only responsibility is to output that in a nice fashion. That's it. The controller is like the project manager. So the controller is going to be doing all sorts of things, asking the database for data, making decisions, checking permissions, so on and so forth. And then you just pass any data that would actually need to be displayed into the view like this. Now, I don't believe in preemptive memorization, so I don't think we need to worry about memorizing all of the different Blade features right now, but I want to show you just an example of one Blade feature so that you can get a taste for how powerful and easy Blade is. So check this out. Imagine if we had an array or a list of multiple pets. So you can do this with me, right? Right below this line where we said imagine we loaded from the database, let's have another variable, so $, and let's say it animals equals an array. So square brackets, semicolon, and let's just have a list of like 3 animal names. So let's say meows a lot, comma, barks a lot, comma, purrs loud. So this is not an associative array. An associative array is where you have a label or a name and then a value. This is just a simple array, right? It's just a list of 3 strings. But the idea is, imagine if we wanted to pass this into our view and then loop through it and have like an unordered list in the view, right? So like a UL, hit tab, and then we wanted 3 list items, right? 1 for each animal in the array. But we didn't know maybe there's like 100 animals in the array. We want our view to be dynamic. So check this out. In our controller, we would pass this into the view. So right about here in this associative array, let's say quotes like all animals equals greater than $animals, comma. So we're just giving it one more property. This is the value. So now in our view, we could access it from $all animals. So we can save this. Now check this out. Here's what I want to show you. In a Blade template, there are all sorts of different directives. In a Blade template, you use the @ symbol to use a directive. The one I want to show you right now is for each. So we just say for each, parentheses. We want to loop through, we named it all animals as, and then you get to make up a singular name. So let's just call it, singular animal. And now check this out. Let's end the for each. Oops. End for each. But then in between the for each and the end for each, right about here, we can just have a list item and then, double curly brackets and just say $animal. And now whether there's 3 or 300 items in this array, we're going to get a bulleted list. So if we save that and refresh, awesome. Now, that was just one example of the for each directive, but there are tons of different directives in Blade. So it makes it really easy to do something that's conditional, right? With an if else or a loop, or if a user's logged in or not, so on and so forth. There's lots of little goodies and tips and tricks like this in Blade that make building the exact HTML we need a piece of cake. Cool. Now the question is, where do we go from here? Well, this course is not about CSS and graphic design. So you and I are not going to choose the colors of our website, and the fonts, and the font size, and the spacing, and the columns. Right? That's graphic design. That's web design. That would have zero educational value in a course about Laravel. So instead, we're going to work with HTML and CSS templates that I've already created for us. But we're not missing any educational value. It's just simple HTML, static HTML. The idea is that you and I are going to bring it to life and make it a dynamic Laravel web application together, step by step. So for example, here on my computer, I have these different static HTML files. Don't worry, we're going to work with these files in the very next lesson together. However, if I just open up this file called, homeguest.html, this gives you an idea of what we're going to build, right? So this is just static HTML. Nothing actually works if you were to submit the form or try to log in. So we're not missing anything educational. This is just simple HTML and CSS, but you and I are going to bring this into Laravel. We're going to learn about Blade templates and how to stay organized, and we're going to build out this application bit by bit, right? So there's a home page. You can sign up for an account. You can log in. Once you're logged in, you'll see a feed of posts from the users you follow. You can click this button to create a new post, but these are just static HTML templates. So you and I don't have to choose the colors or the fonts or the layout, but in our very next lesson, we're going to start importing these static HTML files into this concept of a Blade template. I think it's going to be a ton of fun to make this dynamic and come to life together. We're going to learn a ton in the process, so let's keep our momentum rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson.